Thank you again, Madam Chair. You know, in my opening remarks, I mentioned how unions and politicians enabling the unions have really done a disservice to our students. I mention that because as a physician, I know that brain development intertwines, or if you will, interacts with the instruction a child receives. So if a child misses out a year of education when her brain is at that critical point of development, it may not be recoverable. That's what we have to acknowledge. And at the outset, in the chair's testimony, she had mentioned some differences between the two parties. I'll mention those as well. In these packages that we passed to give financial aids to school, it was a battle for Republicans to get resources for parochial and private schools. And once we allocated it, some Democratic governors refused to give it. It was incredibly frustrating. But that probably points to a difference in perspective. From the Republican standpoint, we take it from the perspective of the student and her or his family, not from the teachers, or not from the school itself. And that is distinctly a different perspective. Because Ms. Wall, you spoke about taking your children into the private setting. And you implied, you were very delicate, that they cost you a fair amount of money, but your family could afford. There are a lot of families out there who cannot afford. Any comment on that, Mrs. Wall?
Thank you, Senator. We had every intention to send all three of our children to public school. I went to public school. My husband went to public school. However, when it was clear that public school was not going to provide in-person instruction for our children, we chose to send our middle son to private school. Now, had they had in-person instruction, he would have been at public school. So we made that decision for him because we knew it was best for him, and he had more or less a normal year, and we were grateful for that. But as you mentioned, most families—
Stop for a second. He had essentially a normal year.
Yes.
And you're about to say most families could not afford such an arrangement.
Correct.
And I suspect if you had to send all three, it would have been difficult for your family.
Yes.
So, Mr. Goldhaber, Dr. Goldhaber, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Senator Cassidy. I guess I just wanted to strike a little bit of an optimistic note because I actually think that recovery is possible.
Can I stop you on that because I need to develop another point. In your data, did you differentiate between students who attended a public school and students who attended an alternative setting?
No, these were all students that were in public schools.
And what about those who were in charter versus those who were in traditional public?
We did not separately analyze. We were looking at data from test scores administered by NWEA, and we didn't separately look at students that were in charter schools.
Sounds good. Or I understand that. Let me put it that way. Then let me make the point that I do know that there were religious schools and private schools and charter schools that made the decision to remain open and or to open earlier and or to put in these enriched possibilities, but not, public schools were closed. Now, what we've heard today, we don't need Dr. Goldhaber to have analyzed that, because what we've heard today is that the determinant variable in how students did was whether or not the school was open, from the point of view of the teacher and from the point of view of statistical analysis. So really, our focus should be, how do we give the parent the right to choose the school where her child can get the best instruction for that child, no matter the moment? If one school is shut down, then another school would be open, and the parent should have that choice. We've also heard that there can be financial barriers in order to achieve that option. I've introduced legislation that would encourage the ability for a family of limited means to still be able to attend the school that is best for their child, because another school might be closed or for other reasons. So I hope that in the future, both parties, it can be bipartisan, that we take the perspective of the student and her family as opposed to the school itself, agnostic as the school, so that the child will actually have the greatest opportunity for herself or himself. I thank you all for being here. I yield.